It was mid-afternoon when I walked into my own home and found Deborah, my wife of 20 years, in our bed with Roger Hayes. Roger, scrambling for his pants, looked at me, then at Deborah, a pathetic apology already forming on his lips. Deborah screamed my name, but the sound was drowned out by Roger's snicker as he pulled on his jeans. "About time you figured it out, Frank," he muttered, adjusting his belt. I had returned home earlier than planned, the afternoon light already softening outside the kitchen window. The house was too quiet, a stillness that felt off. I heard a faint, rhythmic creaking from upstairs. It wasn't the settling of old timber. It was more deliberate, more regular. I moved towards the staircase, my steps measured and light on the carpet. The sound intensified as I approached the master bedroom. The door was not fully closed, a sliver of darkness visible along the jamb. I pushed the door open without knocking. The sight was immediate, undeniable. Deborah was in the bed. Roger Hayes was with her. My brain registered the details, the tangled sheets, the hasty movements, Roger's pale skin against the pillows. He looked at me, then at Deborah, his mouth working. But no sound came out. He was fumbling for his jeans on the floor. I stepped inside the room. Roger had his back mostly to me. I reached out, grabbed his shoulder, and spun him around. My right fist connected with his jaw. It was a clean hit. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with surprise, a thin line of blood already forming at the corner of his mouth. He hit the wall with a dull thud. I stepped closer. My left fist found his gut, a short, sharp jab. The air left him in a sudden rush. He doubled over, gasping. I delivered another, harder blow to his jaw. It was quiet, methodical work. He fell to his knees, clutching his face. "Frank," Deborah's voice sliced through the air, high-pitched and laced with panic. "Frank, stop! What are you doing?" Her outcry confirmed what my eyes had already shown me. It was Roger. There was no longer any doubt. I looked at Deborah for a moment, her face a mask of shock and fear. There was nothing to say. I turned and walked out of the bedroom. As I descended the stairs, her pleas escalated, her voice cracking. "Frank, where are you going? Don't leave. We need to talk about this." I ignored the sounds. The front door closed behind me with a soft click. I got into my truck and started the engine. The sun was still high, glinting off the windshield. I drove without a specific destination, then turned towards the highway. A discount liquor store appeared on the right. I pulled into the parking lot, bought a bottle of cheap bourbon, and a bag of ice from the convenience store next door. Back in the truck, I twisted the cap off the bottle and took a long, burning swallow. The parking lot was mostly empty, the late afternoon light fading. My phone vibrated. It was Deborah. I let it ring. A text came through a moment later. Then another call. Then more texts. They accumulated on the dashboard, a steady stream of digital demands for explanation, for conversation, for my presence. I systematically ignored each one. The bourbon warmed my throat, then my chest. I watched the sparse traffic pass on the road. Hours later, the bottle was half empty. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up. Deborah's name flashed on the screen. I answered it. Her voice was shaky, quiet. "Frank? Are you there? Please talk to me." "It's over, Deborah," I said. My voice sounded flat, distant. "The marriage is over." There was a silence on her end, then a small, choked sound. I didn't wait for her to respond. I pressed the end call button. The screen went dark. I took another drink, the liquid smooth now, less harsh. I reclined the seat, closed my eyes, and spent the night in the truck. The next morning, the sun was bright, already heating the cab. I had a dull ache behind my eyes. I drove to a department store. I purchased a new pair of jeans, a shirt, and some basic toiletries. I found a gas station with a clean restroom and changed. The new clothes felt foreign, but they were clean. My old ones went into a trash can outside. I drove to the office. The office was quiet when I arrived. Gary Peterson, my business partner, wasn't in yet. I sat at my desk. My computer showed a new stack of messages from Deborah. Emails now. Joining the texts and missed calls. The subject lines were variations of, "Please talk to me." "Where are you?" "What happened?" I opened none of them. Gary walked in about 10 minutes later. He stopped dead at the doorway to my office. "Frank? What the hell happened to you?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "You look like you slept in your truck. And is that bourbon I smell?" I looked at him. "Deborah and Roger," I stated. "I came home yesterday. They were together. In my bed." Gary's face registered the information. His mouth opened, then closed. He didn't ask for details, for which I was grateful. "Jesus? Frank?" he finally managed. "I'm leaving," I said. "For a while. Indefinitely." I looked around my office, at the stacks of paperwork, the framed photos of sales achievements. "You'll have to handle things. Consider my interest dormant. I'll be in touch." He stared at me, then nodded slowly. "All right, Frank. Just be careful." I stood up. There was nothing else to do here. I needed to get to the marina. The boat was already provisioned for a short trip, but now it would need more. I had a lot of open water ahead of me. My first stop after leaving the office was the bank. Not our joint account bank, but a different branch, a different institution entirely. I walked in, asked for a new checking and savings account, solely in my name. The teller, a young woman with a neat ponytail, processed the forms without a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. It was just another transaction for her. I signed the necessary papers, accepted the temporary debit card, and a starter checkbook. Its pages crisp and blank. The act felt definitive, a cold, financial incision separating my future from our shared past. Back at the office, I found Gary's desk empty. I took a plain sheet of paper and wrote a succinct note. "Gary, I'm out. Manage things. I'll check in remotely for critical matters. Consider my interest dormant for now. Frank." I folded it once and left it under his keyboard, where he couldn't miss it. There was nothing more to say to him at this moment. The marina air was thick with the scent of salt and diesel. My 33-foot Grady White, the Serenity, sat in its slip, rocking gently with the harbor's subtle currents. I had bought her 5 years ago, a dream vessel for weekend fishing trips that had become less frequent with Deborah's disinterest. Now, she was my escape route. I unzipped the canvas covers, revealing the polished fiberglass and stainless steel. I checked the lines, ensuring they were sound, and adjusted the fenders. Inside the cabin, I unfolded a large chart covering the table. My finger traced a route, south through the Great Lakes, down the Mississippi River, across the Gulf of Mexico, around Florida, then island hopping through the Keys, eventually pointing towards the Bahamas. Nassau. It was a long run, requiring careful planning. I marked potential fuel stops, calculated distances, estimated travel times. The process was methodical, a way to focus my mind on tangible tasks rather than the recent wreckage. I lifted the engine hatch. The twin Yamahas gleamed, well-maintained. I checked the oil levels, coolant, and the fuel filters. The main tank held 200 gallons, the auxiliary, another 50. With my cruising speed, that was enough for significant stretches without refueling. But not enough for the entire journey. I started the port engine, then the starboard. The rumbling vibration beneath my feet was a familiar, reassuring sound. They hummed steadily, ready for extended travel. My phone, which had been buzzing sporadically in my pocket, felt heavy. I pulled it out. Several more messages from Deborah. I went into the settings, selected her contact, and blocked her number. I didn't want the distraction. Then I switched the phone to silent. A notification popped up. New voicemail from Deborah Miller. I didn't listen to it. The digital ping was enough to register its existence, another plea for reconciliation, no doubt. The idea was absurd, but the thought of her calling for reconciliation, even with Roger likely still in my house, stirred a cold, precise fury within me. It wasn't a shouting rage, but a chilling clarity. I unblocked her number, found her contact, and dialed. The phone rang 3 times before she answered, her voice hesitant. "Frank? Is that you? Where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Deborah," I said, my voice flat, betraying nothing. "And my whereabouts are no longer your concern. Please, Frank, we need to talk. I know you're angry. But don't bother trying to reconcile." I cut her off. "There's nothing left. It's over. Completely." I heard a faint murmur in the background, a man's voice. "Roger." The confirmation was precise, like a chemical reaction. "I hope you two are comfortable in my house," I added, the implication clear. "Because you won't be seeing me there again." There was a choked gasp on her end. Then Roger's voice, clearer now, a nervous question. I didn't wait for a response. I pressed the red button, ending the call. I blocked her number again immediately. I imagined their faces, the realization settling in. My house was theirs now, for however long they chose to stay. I didn't care. I pulled myself back into the cockpit. The sun was dipping lower, painting the sky in oranges and purples. I untied the bowline, then the stern. The engines idled smoothly. I engaged reverse, slowly backing the Serenity out of the slip. The marina lights began to flicker on. My truck, a reliable old Ford, sat alone in the empty marina lot. A sturdy, metallic marker of the life I was leaving behind. It was a clear line drawn. Once clear of the breakwater, I set my course for the open water, engaging the autopilot. The boat responded, the bow cutting a clean line through the darkening waves. I checked the navigation display, confirming my heading. On another screen, the marine weather forecast showed clear skies for the next 24 hours. But I noted a system forming offshore, days away. I would monitor it, make adjustments as needed. That's what you did out here. You planned, you observed, and you adapted. Deborah often considered Frank's demanding travel schedule, the long stretches he spent away for business. She had her own ambitions, her career as a senior architect requiring significant hours, late nights at the office. The firm was her second home, a place where her efforts were recognized, where she felt valued. It was during one of Frank's longer trips that Roger Hayes, a junior partner, approached her. He had a land deal, fast-tracked, high stakes. It needed her expertise, her eye for detail, her ability to navigate complex zoning laws. He was charismatic, eager, and seemed to genuinely admire her work. She agreed to help. Their collaboration started innocently enough. Late nights at the office became a regular occurrence, fueled by lukewarm coffee and takeout. These work sessions eventually bled into dinners, then drinks, then social outings disguised as networking. There was a subtle shift, a change in the way Roger looked at her, the way he lingered. Deborah felt it, acknowledged it. She pinpointed the moment, an evening after a particularly successful presentation, when his hand brushed hers a little too long, his gaze holding hers a little too intensely. That was when it crossed a definitive line. She knew. She rationalized it. Frank was always gone. He was focused on his business, on his own life. She was lonely, she told herself. Her emotional needs were unmet. Roger offered attention, validation, a sense of being seen. It felt good. A temporary balm for a quiet ache she hadn't fully recognized until then. The first physical intimacy happened after another late night. It was impulsive, charged with a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. As soon as it was over, apprehension set in, a cold wave of fear. What had she done? What were the consequences? The questions circled, but Roger's comforting words, his assurances, managed to push them back, for a time. He began to subtly exert pressure. His compliments on her work, his praise of her talent, started to intertwine with their secret encounters. A promotion was coming up, he'd mentioned, a significant project. He made it clear that her standing at the firm, her professional trajectory, was something he championed. It was a soft, insidious pressure, a quiet implication that their intimacy was, in some unspoken way, linked to her career success. The conflict within her intensified, a tight knot of guilt and ambition. Her commitment to Frank, once absolute, now felt permeable, something she could compartmentalize. Out on the open water, the Serenity pitched and rolled through a squall. The wind howled, whipping spray across the bridge. Rain lashed down, obscuring the horizon. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white, steering by instruments. My thoughts, despite the immediate danger, drifted back. I remembered the first time I saw Deborah. It was at a friend's barbecue, years ago. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a sound that cut through the background noise of the party. She wore a simple white dress, and the sun caught her hair. I thought she was unattainable, a woman out of my league. But I walked over, introduced myself. We talked for hours. Our courtship was earnest, a slow, steady building of trust and affection. Her sharp mind, her quick wit, her ambitious drive, these were the things that drew me in, that held me. I remembered her distinct laugh, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners. The memories were vivid, precise, almost tactile. Now, those cherished memories clashed violently with the image of her and Roger in our bed. The dissonance was a physical ache. It solidified my resolve. There was no going back. The past was a landscape irrevocably altered, scarred. Deborah, meanwhile, continued her attempts to contact me. The calls, the texts, the voicemails. She painted the affair as a momentary lapse, a transient error born of loneliness. She wanted to explain, to rationalize, to fix it. I let the messages accumulate, a digital tide I had no intention of stemming. I maintained the distance, both emotional and physical. There was no engaging with her justifications. The immediate repercussions of my departure began to settle in for her. The silence in the house, the empty spaces I used to occupy. Fear, then anxiety, began to creep in. And beneath it all, a simmering resentment towards me. For leaving, for making her feel this way. She sat on the edge of our bed, the sheets still carrying a faint, foreign scent. Roger was gone for the day, back at work. She considered the future, the implications of my definitive departure. A new kind of resolve formed within her. She decided, with a chilling certainty, to continue the affair. Frank, she reasoned, would never truly uncover the full extent of her deception. He was gone. He couldn't. Weeks turned into a blur of open water, changing skies, and the rhythmic hum of the engines. I had reached Florida, navigating the intracoastal waterway, preparing for the jump across to the Bahamas. My mind, stripped of the daily routines of my old life, began to focus with a new, cold clarity. The betrayal, while raw, was now a problem to be solved, a case to be built. One morning, my satellite phone rang. It was Gary. His voice was clipped, urgent. Frank, Deborah's trying to access the joint accounts. She claims she needs funds for household expenses and immediate living costs. Freeze everything, Gary, I said, my voice calm. All joint assets. Restrict her access completely. Tell her to consult her attorney. Are you sure? He asked, a hint of unease in his tone. She sounds pretty desperate. Absolutely, I confirmed. Do it now. After the call, I connected my laptop to the boat's satellite internet. The connection was slow, expensive, but reliable enough. I spent the next few days meticulously reviewing every financial statement for the past 2 years. Bank accounts, credit cards, investment portfolios. I wasn't looking for large sums, but for patterns, anomalies. My eyes scanned transaction lists, filtering out the mundane. I found them. Several unusual charges on our shared credit cards. A weekend stay at a resort hotel in Door County, Wisconsin last spring, when Deborah had told me she was on a girls' weekend with college friends. Another charge for a fancy restaurant, again, when I was away on business. Individually, they were small, easy to overlook. Together, they formed a faint trail. The next step was clear. I needed an investigator. I searched online for reputable private investigators in our home state, focusing on discreet, results-oriented firms. I found Mr. Blading-MC Davies, a former police detective. His website was sparse, professional. I sent an email, keeping it brief and to the point. He responded within hours. We spoke via encrypted satellite call. I provided him with Roger Hayes' name, a description, and Deborah's workplace, the architecture firm. I want to know everything, I told him. Dates, times, locations, leave no stone unturned. He listened, his voice calm and professional, asking precise questions, outlining his fees. I transferred the retainer. Within a week, Mr. Davies' initial reports started coming in. They were factual, devoid of judgment. He detailed frequent meetings between Deborah and Roger, not just at the office, but for extended work dinners, often stretching late into the evening. He noted shared meals, sometimes at upscale restaurants, sometimes at more private, less conspicuous establishments. It was exactly what I expected, a confirmation of the obvious. I needed more. Mr. Davies. I wrote in an email. I require specific supporting documentation. Phone records for both parties, work schedules, any hotel receipts you can legally obtain. Look for patterns, especially when I was out of town. His next update included detailed phone records. They showed extensive communication between Deborah and Roger outside of typical business hours. Late-night calls, early morning texts. He also noted a pattern of Roger claiming business travel dates that, through his discreet inquiries, often coincided with Deborah's documented absences from home. She would tell me she was at a conference or visiting a relative. Roger would be ostensibly on a business trip. I cross-referenced these dates with my own meticulously kept travel log. The overlap was undeniable. There were numerous instances where my absence from home coincided perfectly with Roger's business trips and Deborah's conveniently timed obligations. My time away, which she had so often complained about, had provided the perfect cover. Then came the photographs. Mr. Davies sent a series of time-stamped images. Deborah and Roger, entering and exiting a specific residential building, not Deborah's home, not Roger's, but an apartment building I didn't recognize. They were casual, comfortable, often holding hands, or with Roger's arm around her. The evidence was irrefutable. The comprehensive report arrived as a single, encrypted PDF. It included all the details: the phone records, the work schedules, the photographic evidence, the precise dates, and times. It was a cold, clinical summary of a betrayal that had stretched back years, woven into the fabric of our lives. I opened a new document on my laptop and began compiling a precise, factual timeline. Each entry was dated, cross-referenced with the evidence Mr. Davies provided. It was the foundation of my legal case. A systematic dismantling of my marriage. Piece by precise piece, the financial investigation Mr. Davies conducted began to yield more unsettling details. He reported significant bank transfers from one of our joint savings accounts to a personal account, solely in Deborah's name, which I hadn't known existed. The transfers weren't massive, but they were regular, spanning back nearly 3 years. Each transaction was dated, precise. My logical conclusion was clear. Deborah had been systematically diverting marital funds, siphoning off money over an extended period, creating her own financial cushion. Then came the specific credit card purchase. A charge for an expensive Swiss watch from a high-end jeweler, almost $8,000, appeared on a card we shared. The timing coincided with Roger's birthday. Mr. Davies, with quiet efficiency, provided a photograph of Roger Hayes wearing a watch matching the description and price point. It was a gift, paid for with our marital funds. This discovery shifted my focus. Roger Hayes, the man in my bed with my wife, was not just a competitor or a temporary distraction. His involvement now seemed to carry a financial dimension. I instructed Mr. Davies to expand his investigation to include Roger's personal financial situation and his asset portfolio. I wanted a comprehensive picture. Mr. Davies worked quickly. His next report was stark. Roger Hayes was deeply burdened by substantial personal debt. Several lines of credit. High-interest loans. He was also in the midst of a contentious divorce from his wife, Brenda Hayes, a process that was proving costly and drawn out. This information painted a different picture of Roger. His motivations, it seemed, were not solely emotional. There was a calculated aspect, a clear financial incentive. While processing this, I remembered something else. An old letter, unopened, tucked away in a desk drawer from a mutual acquaintance. A distant cousin named Carol. She wasn't one for direct confrontation, but prone to vague warnings. I had ignored it at the time, dismissing it as idle chatter. I retrieved the envelope. Inside, a brief note, dated almost a year ago, mentioned some gossip going around about Deborah and that new junior partner at her firm. It advised me to keep an eye out. I called Carol. She was hesitant at first, clearly uncomfortable. "Frank, I didn't want to get involved," she started. "But people were talking. I saw them once, at a hotel bar during a conference. They were very close. More than just colleagues." Her voice trailed off, but the confirmation was there. A quiet, reluctant testimony. I then used various online resources, public records databases, and professional networking sites to conduct a deeper background check on Roger Hayes. The information accumulated steadily. I uncovered a history of questionable professional ethics. There was a prior workplace misconduct claim from his previous firm, settled out of court, involving an alleged inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. The details were vague due to the settlement, but the pattern was undeniable. Roger was a predator, skilled in navigating professional boundaries for personal gain. A cold plan began to form. I drafted a carefully worded, anonymous email. The recipient was Roger's law firm's managing partner, with a blind copy to their human resources department. The email alluded to unethical conduct and potential professional misconduct by a junior partner named Roger Hayes, citing specific, though generic, dates that overlapped with my new information. There was no direct accusation of the affair, only a hint of impropriety that would trigger internal scrutiny. It was a fuse, lit remotely. I instructed Mr. Davies to discreetly monitor Roger's firm for any signs of an internal investigation or changes in his employment status. I wanted to see the ripple effect. My own affairs required immediate attention. I spent hours reviewing my insurance policies, life, health, property, and my estate plans. I made amendments, updating beneficiaries, ensuring that my assets were safeguarded, ring-fenced from any potential claims. It was a necessary defensive maneuver. The journey I was on was not just about physical distance. It was a deep dive into the true cost of human connection, the choices people make, and the quiet destruction they leave behind. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. I contacted Mr. Schmidt, a divorce attorney highly recommended by Gary's network. He had a reputation for being meticulous, logical, and effective. I transmitted a concise, evidence-based summary of all my findings: the financial diversions, the watch, Roger's debt, his prior misconduct, and all of Miss Davies's surveillance reports to his office. My email ended with a request for a strategic consultation. The time for passive observation was over. Mr. Schmidt's initial response to my evidence was exactly what I had hoped for. Frank, he stated during our first virtual consultation, his voice steady. This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've seen. The level of detail, the scope of the evidence, it's truly irrefutable. He then laid out a precise legal strategy. A no-fault divorce, he explained, but one where the overwhelming evidence of financial misconduct and infidelity would maximize my leverage for asset division. It wasn't about proving fault in court, but about positioning me for the most favorable outcome in negotiations. I gave him the authorization to proceed. Initiate the proceedings immediately, I instructed. Mr. Schmidt's office formally filed the divorce petition and arranged for Deborah to be served with the legal papers. The summons arrived at her home a few days later, accompanied by a detailed appendix. My compiled timeline, the photographs, the bank records, the credit card statements, all the precise, cold facts. Deborah's reaction was immediate and predictable. My satellite phone, briefly unblocked for communication with Mr. Schmidt, began to ring. Her number flashed repeatedly. Texts poured in, now urgent, panicked pleas. Frank. What is this? I need to talk to you. This is insane. My phone remained unresponsive. I had built a wall. She consulted her own attorney quickly. Her lawyer, I imagined, would be as surprised as she was by the depth and precision of my preparatory work. Mr. Schmidt later relayed through an email that her attorney was visibly shaken by the volume and nature of the evidence presented. Meanwhile, the anonymous email I sent to Roger's firm had found its mark. Mr. Davies reported that Roger had been summoned to an internal meeting regarding the misconduct tip. Roger, predictably, denied all allegations. But the firm, sensitive to professional ethics and potential liability, commenced an internal review. The existence of the expensive gift watch, paid for on our joint credit card, coupled with Roger's own financial inconsistencies now under scrutiny in his divorce, added weight to the anonymous claims. It was enough to create a crack. Brenda Hayes, Roger's estranged wife, learned of the allegations. Whether it was through leaks from Roger's firm or her own attorney, I didn't know. What mattered was that she began her own inquiries into Roger's affairs. A woman scorned, with a contentious divorce underway, was a formidable ally in a quiet war. Mr. Davies continued his work, now monitoring Deborah's legal team. He looked for any counter-strategies, any attempts to discredit my evidence, any signs of an offensive. The reports showed nothing significant. They were on the defensive, reacting to my moves, not initiating their own. We should pursue an expeditious settlement, Mr. Schmidt, I directed during our next call. Leverage the overwhelming body of evidence. I want this concluded efficiently. He agreed. The goal was to avoid protracted litigation, which would only serve to drain resources and prolong the inevitable. Deborah's attorney, facing the comprehensive and irrefutable case, advised her to consider a settlement. Given the evidence, Miss Miller, I imagined her lawyer saying, a protracted legal battle would likely be detrimental to your interests. The prospect of a public airing of her infidelity and financial impropriety would be a significant deterrent. I spent an afternoon drafting a clear list of non-negotiable terms for the impending divorce settlement. These included full retention of my business interests, a significant portion of the marital assets, and a clear division of all debts. I left no room for ambiguity. News of the impending divorce and the underlying circumstances began to circulate within our professional and social circles. It was inevitable. The whispers would start, then spread. That was part of the price of betrayal, paid not just by those directly involved, but by their reputations. I remained offshore, the serenity cutting through calm Caribbean waters. My emotional detachment was complete. I had put my trust in Mr. Schmidt, in the logical progression of the law, and in the strength of the evidence. The process was now a professional transaction, devoid of personal sentiment. The initial court hearing was scheduled. My attorney, Mr. Schmidt, informed me of the date and time. Due to my business prominence, a small amount of local media interest had already been generated. The local paper ran a brief article about the prominent local businessman initiating divorce proceedings. It was all very detached, a distant hum. Deborah's attorney, as expected, opened by attempting to minimize the affair. He characterized it as a regrettable, but minor, symptom of a generally failing marriage, a relationship that had suffered from Frank's extended absences and emotional unavailability. He tried to paint Deborah as a lonely, misunderstood figure. Mr. Schmidt, however, was precise. He systematically presented the photographic evidence, the detailed financial records of the diverted funds, the credit card statements showing the luxury purchases. Each piece of evidence was laid out with cold, logical progression, demonstrating not just an affair, but a pattern of deliberate deceit and financial impropriety. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with a reputation for impartiality, listened intently, her expression unreadable. Roger Hayes was issued a subpoena to testify. This public legal demand further complicated his already precarious standing at his law firm, which was still conducting its internal review. He appeared in court, looking uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Under cross-examination from Mr. Schmidt, Roger's testimony was evasive. He contradicted himself multiple times, stammering through questions about the nature of his relationship with Deborah, the origin of the watch, and his own financial situation. He was unconvincing, his discomfort palpable. His attempts to deflect and deny only served to highlight his culpability. In a strategic move, Brenda Hayes, Roger's estranged wife, provided supplementary information to Frank's legal team. She detailed Roger's history of deception, his manipulative character, and previous instances where he had used women for financial gain. Her testimony, given in a sworn affidavit, provided context to Roger's motivations, lending credence to the idea that Deborah was not just a romantic entanglement, but a means to an end. The presiding judge, having observed the initial presentations, ordered a complete disclosure of all financial assets from both Frank and Deborah, a standard procedure, but one that Frank was prepared for. My team had already compiled everything. Deborah, however, would now be forced to disclose her previously hidden account and the extent of her spending. Frank's legal team then revealed additional evidence, more credit card statements, more receipts showing Deborah's increasingly extravagant spending with Roger, using marital funds. Dinners, weekends away, small gifts, all paid for with money I had earned. It wasn't just the watch, it was a pattern. Deborah underwent intense questioning during her deposition. Mr. Schmidt, polite but relentless, pressed her on the financial transfers, the credit card purchases, the dates coinciding with my travel. She struggled, her justifications unraveling under the weight of the evidence. She claimed ignorance, then forgetfulness, then blamed me for being absent. None of it held up. The judge issued an interim order, freezing specific accounts to prevent further dissipation of assets. She also established preliminary arrangements for the marital assets, a temporary measure, but one that clearly favored my position. It was a strong signal of the court's view of the evidence. Roger's law firm acted swiftly after his subpoena and poor showing. Mr. Davies confirmed that Roger had been placed on administrative leave, pending the outcome of their internal investigation and the ongoing divorce cases. His professional career, it seemed, was now in jeopardy. I ensured that all communication with Deborah was strictly channeled through our respective legal representatives. There was no direct contact, no emotional appeals. It was all handled by the lawyers, an impersonal transaction. Public sentiment, fueled by the local media reports and the whispers circulating, began to shift distinctly against Deborah and Roger. The story was no longer about a failing marriage, but but about a deliberate betrayal, about a prominent woman caught in a compromising and financially dubious affair. Gary, along with several other business associates, sent messages of support and solidarity. "Hang in there, Frank," Gary wrote. "We're all behind you." It was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. From my remote location, anchored in a secluded cove, I meticulously reviewed every court document, every affidavit, every transcript that Mr. Schmidt's office sent. I looked for accuracy, for inconsistencies, for any potential vulnerabilities in the case. The process was a meticulous dissection, ensuring every detail was precise, every fact undeniable. The final settlement negotiations commenced. Mr. Schmidt's confidence was palpable. My strong evidentiary position dictated the terms. There was no room for significant bargaining on Deborah's part. The facts were too stark, too precise. Deborah's attorney advised her to accept a financially unfavorable settlement. He made it clear that a public trial would expose her fully, leading to immense public humiliation and potential legal repercussions for financial fraud related to the diverted funds. The choice was stark. Accept the terms or risk utter devastation. She accepted. I secured a substantial majority of the marital assets. My business remained under my full, undisputed control. The legal agreement was signed. Finalized. The marriage, a 20-year investment of time and emotion, was legally dissolved. The ripples of my actions continued to spread. Roger Hayes was officially terminated from his law firm. The internal investigation, fueled by my anonymous tip and Brenda Hayes's cooperation, found enough evidence of professional misconduct to justify his dismissal. His professional career, built on a foundation of ambition and deception, was now irrevocably damaged. Mr. Davies sent me a final report confirming it. Brenda Hayes, empowered by the revelations, filed for divorce from Roger. Her grounds were clear: infidelity and financial mismanagement. A direct result of his actions with Deborah, the consequences for him were piling up. Deborah faced her own set of difficulties. The news, initially whispers, became open conversation. She experienced significant social ostracism within our former circle. Her professional reputation was tarnished. She encountered immediate difficulty securing new employment in her field. Doors that had once been open were now firmly shut. Upon the finalization of the divorce, I felt a complex mix of relief and a persistent cold bitterness. The process was over. The fight was won, but the wounds remained. Relief that the legal battle was behind me. Bitterness for the years wasted. For the trust shattered. Deborah was compelled to sell her share of a jointly owned investment property at a considerable loss to cover her legal fees and new living expenses. The financial impact on her was severe, forcing a dramatic reduction in her standard of living. The grand house, the expensive cars, the lavish lifestyle, all were gone. Roger, in a fit of desperation and anger, attempted to contact Deborah. Their conversations quickly devolved into arguments, then mutual recriminations. He blamed her for his downfall. She blamed him for leading her astray. Their affair, born of deceit, ended in bitterness. Mr. Davies, observing from a distance, confirmed the final, angry dissolution of their connection. I ensured that all future financial and legal ties with Deborah were definitively severed. No lingering shared accounts, no joint investments, no common ground whatsoever. A clean break, surgically precise. Though emotionally scarred by the betrayal, I experienced a profound sense of vindication and justice. The truth had been uncovered, and the consequences meted out. It was not a joyous outcome, but it was a fair one. News reports continued to detail Roger's professional downfall, often connecting it back to the ongoing Miller divorce. Deborah's public difficulties, her struggles to find work, were also occasionally mentioned, though more subtly. Gary, when we spoke, expressed his admiration for my methodical approach and steadfast resolve throughout the ordeal. "You handled it, Frank," he said. "Quietly, effectively. Most people would have just imploded. From the quiet solitude of the Serenity, I reflected on the profound moral costs of betrayal. Not just for myself, the victim, but for those who perpetrated it. The destruction was not contained. It spread, consuming careers, reputations, and futures. The consequences were undeniable, precise, and permanent. My journey continued, but the sensation had shifted. The initial desperate urgency to escape had been replaced by a quiet sense of resolute closure. The vastness of the ocean was no longer a void to disappear into, but a wide-open space for a new kind of beginning. The Serenity became more than just a boat. It was my floating office, my home, my mobile base of operations. I established a fully functional, remote office in the main cabin. My laptop, satellite internet, and a compact printer formed the core. I scheduled regular virtual meetings with Gary, reviewed financial statements, and approved new projects. The business, I learned, continued to thrive. Gary confirmed this during one of our calls. "Your foundational work, Frank," he'd said. "It's what kept us steady. We're actually expanding into that new territory we discussed last year." It was satisfying. A confirmation that my efforts had not been in vain. Between work commitments, I explored. I dropped anchor in diverse coastal towns, walked quiet streets, and sampled local cuisines. I interacted with new acquaintances, small talk with fellow boaters, brief conversations with shopkeepers. These interactions were measured, cautious. I was observing, learning, slowly testing the waters of human connection again. The emotional trauma was a scar, not an open wound. I processed it systematically, through reflection, through the quiet solitude of my days at sea. I acknowledged the pain, the betrayal, but also the lessons. It was a slow rebuilding of my capacity for trust, a careful recalibration of my emotional compass. I understood that trust, once broken, could never be fully restored to its original state. But a new, more discerning trust could be cultivated. Far from the tranquil waters I navigated, Deborah's life had become one of isolation and constraint. I heard through Mr. Schmidt's office that she was struggling. The financial repercussions of the divorce were severe, forcing her into a reduced standard of living. She had lost her professional standing, and her social circle had evaporated. Her past decisions, now laid bare, weighed heavily. Roger Hayes faced his own ongoing challenges. Brenda, his former wife, continued to pursue him for financial damages, the divorce bitter and drawn out. The indelible stigma of his professional misconduct made it impossible for him to secure comparable employment in the legal field. His ambition, once so clear, had been completely derailed. I sent a final, concise email to Gary. It outlined future business expansion strategies, projections for new markets, and a detailed plan for continued growth. It was a clear signal of my intent. I was moving forward, professionally and personally. The last physical connection to my past, the former marital home, was sold. The transaction was handled entirely by realtors and lawyers. I never returned to it. The funds were deposited into my individual accounts, a final severance. I began to contemplate future personal relationships. The caution was palpable. A learned response to past pain, but there was also a heightened sense of self-worth, a clarity about what I deserved and what I would no longer tolerate. It was a slow, deliberate openness, a willingness to consider what might come next, but with eyes wide open. Deborah, I eventually learned, was last noted taking on a lower-paying, non-legal position in a different, anonymous town, far from the life she had once known. Her name was now just another face in a crowd. Roger Hayes was reportedly seen leaving the state entirely, seeking to escape his damaged reputation and the legal battles that continued to hound him. His flight was a final admission of guilt, a tacit acknowledgement of the consequences he could not outrun. As I observed a tranquil sunset from the deck of the Serenity, the sky ablaze with orange and purple over the calm water, I acknowledged the harsh realities I had endured. The pain was still a part of me, a quiet echo, but I embraced the solitude, the peace I had found in forging my own path. I understood that while lingering pain persisted, the logical pursuit of truth had yielded a definitive, albeit cold, resolution. It was not about vengeance, but about justice, about establishing the facts, and letting the consequences unfold, as they naturally should. I opened my GPS, the screen glowing in the dusk, and plotted a new course. Not an escape, but a deliberate progression into an uncertain but entirely self-determined future. The wake of Deborah's betrayal extended far beyond the immediate shock. Her calculated choices led to a profound and continuing unraveling. The professional standing she once valued was irrevocably lost, replaced by social ostracism and career doors slammed shut. Her financial stability, once intertwined with Frank's efforts, evaporated, forcing her into a significantly reduced standard of living in a new, anonymous town. Her attempts at justification had proven hollow against the weight of the evidence, leaving her isolated in the consequences of her own making. Roger Hayes, complicit in the deception, fared no better. His professional career ended in disgrace, his reputation permanently marred by the misconduct that came to light. The contentious divorce from Brenda, fueled by his infidelity and financial schemes, left him burdened and adrift, forcing him to flee the state to escape the persistent scrutiny. Their joint betrayal, a clandestine act intended to benefit them, ultimately yielded a public and lasting destruction of their lives as they knew them. The precise factual consequences had played out with undeniable finality.